You can work from anywhere, with anyone, at any time. That's the reality in 2021. Massive social, cultural, and economic change doesn't happen overnight, except when it does. And clearly, this has been an era when it has been changing. How we work, it's not been optional for us. And I thought about telling a story. Here I am, I'm choosing where I can work, and I've chosen today to be here in the Middlesex filter beds. It's an amazing place. It's returning to nature. So basically, they began building this in 1852. An interesting time when we needed more clean water, as was confirmed by John Snow in 1854, when it became clear, he made it clear that cholera was not carried by miasma, it wasn't carried in the air, but it was spread through water. So 1852 was when they kicked off the waterworks, and Middlesex filter beds, basically it's sort of an industrial scene where they have gravel, they have sand, and they filter the water, and then they're pumping this to businesses and to homes throughout northeast London. Once John Snow confirmed for sure that cholera was spread by water rather than air, you can imagine the tremendous pressure to do more of this, to say, hey, hang on a second, we need to build this out. So you go from 6 filter beds to 20 filter beds, more and more filter beds. And this is a period of rapid change. I mean, this is the Industrial Revolution. So you need clean water. Everybody is rushing into the cities. And that's one of the reasons why cholera was such a problem. So here we are. We're in the Middlesex filter beds. And it tells a story about change, and change that came at a time when indeed there was an infection that was a problem for people. So this is the filter beds. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. I really love it here, come here quite often. And it makes me think about the world we're living in, how things change and when it changes. And circumstances really matter. We literally, overnight, in 2020, had to say to ourselves, you know what, we can't go to the office anymore. That's just not viable. It's not safe, and we need a different way of working. And so many of our tool selections have really had to tie into that reality. And the fact is that tools and platforms can change how we work. We've had to show so much flexibility. Businesses didn't have a choice. People didn't have to have a choice. A lot of it was bad, obviously. This has been a tragic time for so many of us. But it's kind of interesting, the new ways of working. For me, not having to get on planes all the time, spending more time with my children, spending more time with my family, with my wife, has been really interesting. I've had time to reconsider my life. And of course, I've made extensive use, as we all have, of platforms like Slack and Zoom. In your case, quite possibly the Citrix product suite, in order to make us more productive. Or at least in order to, I say more productive, in order for us to just get work done. So from my perspective, and by the way, I'm James Governor, co-founder of a company called Redmonk. We are an industry analyst company. We research the technology choices that software developers and practitioners make. So we really try and understand the world through the lens of the technology user, who increasingly is the most important factor in tech adoption. We call this phenomenon of tech practitioners, of software developers, of operations people making the choices. We call this phenomenon the new kingmakers at Redmonk. My business partner, Stephen O'Grady, wrote a book about that. I think what's interesting to me is if we think about the phenomenon or the phenomena that led us to a situation where developers could be making those choices and where businesses had to respond to that. And, in particular, I'll be talking about the cloud. It used to be that we had to ask for permission for infrastructure. I needed a server, I needed storage, I needed a network. I needed to pay a bunch of vendors a bunch of money. And I had to ask that I could do that. I had to wait for servers to be provisioned. This was a drawn out process. With the cloud, I no longer needed to do that. From a software perspective, we used to have to pay for all of our software. Living in a world of open source, where an engineer can say to themselves, I need to build something. I am going to put this together. We're living in a world of Linux obviously really kicked this off, but if we think more laterally, technologies like Kubernetes, but if we look in databases, we could be looking at Redis, we can be looking at MongoDB, we might be using Neo4j. There's this plethora of tools, these open source technologies that a developer could use, and they didn't need to ask for permission. So you don't need to ask for permission to use infrastructure. Just spin up an Amazon Web Services or other cloud instance. You don't need to ask for permission to use infrastructure software to build the application. And then finally, this incredible phenomenon of social coding and social interaction that we've got on the internet, where we can learn from the best software developers on the planet. I can go to Stack Overflow. I can go to Hacker News. I can go to GitHub, and I can learn from the best software developers on the planet. As I say, I can look at the code that they are checking in. I can look at why and how they're building things. And I can learn from that. And I can use that software. GitHub as a repository of all of this functionality is kind of an amazing, amazing thing. So we mix social coding, the cloud, and, as I've said, open source. It changed everything and how technology was adopted. Increasingly, we've actually moved to a world of managed services. It turns out that you don't want to be managing all of that open source infrastructure that you've built and put together. You want something that is built for you, or at least that is managed for you. World of managed services. We've seen developer experience become ever more important, operator experience become ever more important. And so what you want to do is you want to move away from this notion of the developer having to do all the work and that developer experience gap. You want to give them those sorts of choices, but you want to build a platform that they can be most productive with. And on that note, I wanted to talk and think a little bit about where we are here right now. So this is Hackney Marshes. Hackney Marshes is an amazing place. It was first built in, it was just after the war, so 1946. 120 football pitches. So if you look over here, all of these football pitches, there were 120 of them. There are far fewer today, but it was an amazing thing. And this sort of literally built on the rubble of the Second World War. Obviously, another time of rebuilding, of extreme social change. There were many more women in the workforce. There was this vibrancy in the air of things that needed to be rebuilt. Of course, it was incredibly hard, don't get me wrong, but football was an important part of this notion of recovery. So again, here in London, I mean, every pub had a football team. They didn't all have a football pitch. Here we are, 120 football pitches that could be used, and literally underneath this ground is rubble from buildings that were cleared and or destroyed in the Second World War. This is to me, again, it's about infrastructure, a new platform that came out of a period of change. Over there, in the distance here behind me, we've got the Olympic Park. The Olympic Park, again, it was about regeneration and a new platform that people could take advantage of. What's super interesting to me is that these new kingmaker phenomenon are now, this is something for everyone. So, everybody is wanting to make more effective use of technology. And frankly, there just are not enough developers to go round. It's one thing to say, ask your software developer, ask your DevOps person. But it's another to say, how do we afford them? VC money is pouring in. Salaries are increasing. So we need a broader range of people that are able to take advantage of some of those phenomenon. What are the equivalents of social coding or for business tools? What are the equivalent of these managed services that I might be able to take advantage of? Certainly we're seeing savvy business users make more and more advantage of hosted services than ever before. They're becoming much, much more productive. And some of those new kingmaker phenomenons are now gravitating out. I quite like this taxonomy that Citrix has put forward, where they talk about coders, the classic application developers using APIs, languages like Java or JavaScript and so on. scripters, this is the DevOps people. They're using Ansible, they're using Terraform, they're managing the services. And then the builders, which is like the business users. It's kind of low code kind of thinking. And that's fundamental because, as I say, there are not enough software developers to go round. And we need to be in a world, and we are indeed moving into a world, and we've seen this in technology again and again. Anytime you have to ask for permission, new tooling comes along. So I mentioned it in terms of the new kingmakers, the open source phenomenon, but this had happened before. This had happened before with, mainframes to client server to LANs. That any time you're faced with asking for permission for all of your technology, you're going to go and find something else. It is incredibly important that any technology vendor responds to that. You can't only sell through the enterprise. If we look at the successful platforms today, they've all got this aspect of subscription economy and almost a consumer experience and business model in terms of adoption. So we saw this back in the day with Salesforce, but this is across the board. Talk a bit more about Salesforce. Salesforce is interesting because, it absolutely was departments making a choice about a business tool. You could ask the CIO, do you use the cloud? And they would say no. Meanwhile, the entirety of the Salesforce was running this platform. More latterly, they've done an incredible job, I believe, in that space that we might call builders. They've got a role, the admin, they've got a learning platform, which is Trailhead, and you put this together, and it's literally an economic phenomenon. We know that it is a good middle-class job. We're not talking about some, crazy $350,000 a year with options south of market. We're talking about, $70,000, $80,000 a year as an admin, people that are being productive for their businesses with a very sort of configuring systems view of how to build applications that are useful to the business. Trailhead, as I said, learning platform. Go there as an individual, get some badges, increase your skills. And I think what's really interesting about Salesforce is the way they've tied together that individual learning and adoption with the corporate use. And it's now an economic phenomenon. They're creating so many tens or hundreds of thousands of jobs even. So if we think about that world, who else is there? What else have we seen? Who else has had to make a transition? I think Adobe is interesting to look at. So Adobe, we had Creative Suite. It was this expensive, suite of software that creatives used. Well, actually, it's kind of funny. I guess it hasn't exactly got cheaper, but it is a tool that is chosen by individuals. So it's a bring your own tool. Now, sometimes it's paid for by the business, but people learn the skills, they become more effective, and that's how they want to work. That's their productivity tool, and that goes with them wherever they go. GitHub, you build an identity. You're not just a Citrix person or another sort of vendor person. You're an individual that is building code, sharing code, learning about code, perhaps contributing to open source. All of these are about subscriptions. They're about individual choices. And so I think living in a world, we are past shrink wrap. If we think about people being able to choose their own platforms to be more productive, and whether they be things like Podio or Rike or whatever it is, you've got to change the business model, and you've got to have an individual developer or an individual builder that can adopt them. So that, to me, I think over the last couple of days, the things that Citrix has been talking about, most fundamental for me is this is really moving beyond the shrink wrap era and into a new era. Now, when I talk about that, I do think it's important to say, Citrix has been involved in a notion of working from anywhere for a long time. Initially it was about taking those Windows servers and being able to, make them more useful for a set of people, consolidating the way that Windows was used. But obviously that also became a remote work scenario. So remote work is nothing new to Citrix. And in fact, 2020 kind of showed that. Customers were like, hang on a second, please give us your remote work tools. But obviously it's most important now that we have platforms, because we're living in a world of events and velocity and change, and the way to unleash productivity is to break things into pieces and to allow developers to make choices or allow users to make choices, but then pull those pieces together as a platform. Because platforms enable change, enable cultural change. It's often said, DevOps, it's a culture change, it's not a platform. Well, that's true, but we would not have had DevOps without Puppet and Chef. It's no accident that one of the founders of Puppet is also one of the people, this is Andrew Clay Schaefer, that came up with the word DevOps with Patrick Dubois 10 years ago. So we're on a journey. We need to be working with suppliers of platforms that are working in the cloud, that have the subscription services that can make us more productive, and really that understand integration. Because I think integration is so important. We need glue code as much as we do new code. And that's a place where the builders can really shine. When we think about workspace, bringing some AI into this, the kinds of things that Citrix is trying to do to make people more productive, it's all about integration. We need to be thinking about serverless architectures. We need to be thinking about managed services that can make users more productive. And certainly for me, if we think about these massive social changes, with them come some huge opportunities. So yeah, absolutely. We've been in an environment of stress. There's no doubt about that. But we've also been in an environment of opportunity. If we think of the, Confucius, may you live in interesting times. Interesting times can be painful, but also something new can emerge from them. So yeah, the fundamentals for me, as I'm giving a keynote at Citrix Converge, as I'm thinking about the worlds of tools, technology, and platform, is that choice is so important, and unleashing the productivity of people is so important. And frankly, we're not in a command and control economy anymore. We've had to let people be more free in how they work. Things are not going to completely snap back to normal. Ernst & Young have just said all of their consultants can live and work wherever they want. Organizations like Barclays have said not everybody is going to go back to the office. Hybrid work is definitely a reality, and we're going to need tools that can suit those new ways of working, where we can be situational about tying together the applications we have, about the business events being generated. And, if we look at salaries even, not everybody is going to live in San Francisco, Berlin, London, and so on, and that's clearly a good thing. We started in the filter beds, which were all about everyone coming into one place, coming into the cities in order to work in factories, to work together, this explosion, the Industrial Revolution. Kind of on the verge of a revolution. Again, we don't need to do that. And a lot more of the work can be distributed. We've been through, a period of distributed compute. Now we're really looking at distributed work. And yeah, salaries, are you gonna get paid the same wherever you are? A company called Iterable recently said it doesn't matter where geographically you are on the planet, you will indeed get paid the same rate for your job role. These are sort of fundamental changes. They are about work. They are about the future of work. Because as I say, you can work wherever you want, whenever you want, with whoever you want. And you've got to be able to choose the tools that make you most productive. Platforms, of course, change. They change how we work. It used to be that, frankly, all of the cargo around the country, around Britain, was on narrowboats. That was how they moved cargo around the place. People would either walk or perhaps they'd jog, but in reality, no, they would either walk or they would be, in carriages. and that was the transport infrastructure of the country. Of course, another thing we saw during that industrial revolution was that the barges became less important. The railways were built. Being able to move faster from one place to another, that was for people, that was indeed for cargo and goods. And that was fundamental, again, to that industrial revolution and this new and different way of working. And I guess the question for me is, what are the tools and platforms that we're going to have in terms of this new world of remote work? We've changed the game in terms of technology. There's all of this incredible stuff. Now it's time for businesses to catch up. It's not about digging our heels in. We see some of those behaviors. Oh, get back to work. A British politician yesterday said, oh, people should get off their peloton and get back to work, which to me sounds a bit like, let them eat cake. But the simple truth is, we've got to accommodate a new world of work. We've got to accommodate a new world of business. And the way to do that is with builders, with coders, with scripters, and enabling people and trusting employees to do this incredible work, trusting contractors to do this incredible work, and either building the tools for them that they can do that, or indeed these people doing the work themselves. I talked about velocity, and business needs to move more quickly in order to respond to change. And if we're thinking about me being able to work wherever I want, I'll tell you where I want to work next. So you can work where you want, with who you want, whenever you want. And here I am at my favorite restaurant in London. This is in Shoreditch. This is Smoke and Go. Shoreditch, before the pandemic, this was basically where I spent all my time. Now it's a rare treat. And I just wanted to finish up by saying Citrix Converge. It's a great chance to get in at ground level. They're making changes as a company. They're going to give you a bunch of calls to action. But yeah, they're changing strategy, being more practitioner driven, builders, coders and scripters. That ties into the way that Redmond sees the world, ties into the way I see the world. So I guess all I'd say is I think I'm closing out. It's a Friday afternoon, and it's probably time to relax and perhaps have a nice beverage. So cheers, here's to you. I hope you enjoy the conference and enjoy the rest.